Welcome to MojoPlays, and today we're setting our sights on some first-person shooters that just missed the mark.
Trust me.
Shadow Warrior 2.
We hate it when they do that.
The Shadow Warrior series is a fantastic throwback to the old-school shooters of the 90s, starring a rad dude with a tude shooting dudes, and it honestly doesn't need to be much more than that. Continuing the trend of shooters taking inspiration from the rebooted 2016 entry in the Doom series, as well as hints of the Borderlands franchise with its constant stream of new weapons to turn enemies into piles of goo, players are constantly engaged in frenetic firefights full of blood, bullets, and surprisingly competent melee combat. Complete with up to 4-player co-op, the Shadow Warrior series did receive a follow-up in 2022, but Shadow Warrior 2 remains the high mark for the series. While some might be turned off by the game's foul-mouthed protagonist and juvenile humor, we promise you've never had this much fun playing with your Wang before.
Wang, I thought I smelled comic books and hand lotion.
Cold Winter. On the surface, Cold Winter appears as nothing more than your standard military first-person shooter, and to an extent, that's true. With a wealth of different weapons at your disposal, as well as the ability to craft different equipment by looting bodies, you guide protagonist Andrew Sterling as he jumps, swims, shoots, and ducks for cover through a myriad of locations as he fights to take down a shady group intent on global destruction. What makes the game stand out is its surprisingly gripping story and the game's physics engine, which allows players to create their own cover and enemies will realistically fall to your gunfire or explode into little chunks if you bring out the big guns. While the physics aren't as mind-boggling as something like Half-Life 2, released only a year earlier, it's still impressive for the PS2 era, and keeps what would be an otherwise standard shooter entertaining throughout. Star Wars Republic Commando.
Your weapons, your armor, and most importantly, your brothers.
The 90s and 2000s had no shortage of Star Wars games, but some got more attention than others. And while Republic Commando has seen numerous re-releases in the years since its initial launch, it still hasn't developed the fanbase or franchise ability that it deserves. Instead of putting on the familiar Jedi robes, players are instead kitted out in the clone trooper armor, and along with 3 squad mates the player can issue commands to, are sent on various missions to both familiar and unfamiliar worlds in the Star Wars universe. The shooting is top-notch, and your AI companions are capable soldiers even when you're too entrenched to issue direct commands. Although more linear and shorter than many of the other entries on our list, there's a reason this game maintains a dedicated fanbase almost 2 decades later.
Sorry, Deltas. Looks like it's back to the action. You have your orders.
Delta Squad, lock and load.
Dark Watch, Curse of the West.
Take it easy, partner. You got no clue what you're into. There's no gold in that vault.
With a few exceptions, the Wild West is a surprisingly untapped era for video games, and one combined with supernatural elements is even rarer. Dripping with atmosphere and just oozing cool, Dark Watch straps players into the boots of a cowboy recently turned vampiric, Jericho Cross, awesome name, and through the player's choices can either rid themselves of their affliction or succumb to it and bring about a new apocalypse. With a mix of steampunk and real-world weaponry, Jericho unleashes hell on the demons and monsters standing in his way, and can even tap into his growing vampire abilities through choices that can lead him down the path of good or evil and unlock powers tied specifically to either path. The usually drab visuals work in the game's favor, establishing the bleakness of the world, and some of the game's creature designs are horrifyingly impressive.
Time to play.
Time to die!
The Darkness.
Through you, I am born.
Whereas many first-person shooters focus on the biggest arsenal they can give you, The Darkness instead makes you the weapon. Developed by Starbreeze Studios and based on the comic book of the same name, player character and maid man Jackie Estacado is possessed by the darkness, which manifests as eel-like tendrils that speak to him through the campaign. These Hellspawn can attack enemies or even provide cover, or allow Jackie to infiltrate stealthily, with the snakes silently killing and occasionally eating the many enemies waiting for Jackie. With superb voice acting, tight gameplay, and dripping with atmosphere, plus you can eat the hearts of your enemies, and how metal is that? The Darkness was successful enough to earn a sequel, but both have been forgotten to time and slipped back into the shadows.
Now you are mine.
Call of Juarez, Gunslinger.
Cut their numbers in half, but that just made the ones that were left twice as mad. They made up for their lack of skill with a seemingly endless supply of ammo.
We don't get many modern westerns outside of the Red Dead series these days, but you could do a lot worse than Call of Juarez, Gunslinger. The cel-shaded comic book style graphics give the game a substantial bump in color that helps it stand out not only from most of the other entries on our list, but also in the genre itself. Told from the perspective of an unreliable narrator, the levels themselves can be affected during gameplay should the player character get a bit too carried away with his stories as he crosses paths with some of the most famous names in the Wild West. Shooting is decidedly arcadey in nature, and that's honestly its biggest strength, as along with the rest of the game, it doesn't take itself too seriously, focusing instead on making sure the player is having a great time leveling up their cowboy and scoring as many headshots as humanly possible.
Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid died there in that cemetery not 6 months ago.
Titanfall 2.
Adjusting focus. Are you all right, pilot?
I think so. Wait, did you just call me pilot?
This one probably hurts the most. Overshadowed by a terrible launch date sandwiched between the latest Call of Duty and Battlefield, Titanfall's sequel never stood much of a chance against those heavyweight and legacy shooters. Thankfully, in the years since, it has become far more appreciated, and fans are still demanding a sequel almost daily. With some of the best shooting and movement in the genre, these were the original COD creators after all, as well as a story that lets the player bound in and out of BT, one of the greatest mechs in gaming, hands down, as they parkour and wall run around brilliantly designed levels, in particular Effect and Cause, which might be one of the greatest uses of time travel in a video game. Nothing in the years since has even come close to this modern shooter masterpiece.
I don't know what that'll feel like, to get assigned a new Titan. I kinda like the old one.
Prey 2006. Honestly, either of the Prey games could have ended up on our list, but we're going to focus specifically on the 2006 Prey by Human Head Studios. A year before Valve was thinking with portals, protagonist Tommy was using them to escape an alien ship, along with all manner of physics and gravity-defying puzzles with a plethora of alien weapons at his side. The game's use of portals and an ever-shifting perspective can make for a trippy experience, and while the player can't directly create portals themselves, they can use the ones created by enemies to reach new levels, as well as spirit walk through certain obstacles, and use this ability to revive themselves upon death. Although Arcane Studios' 2017 Prey had nothing in common other than a name, it too suffered the same fate despite being arguably Arcane's best title since Dishonored, and failed to develop much of a following. Bulletstorm.
Listen up, robot dude. Get your head out of your ass and get your shit together. Capiche? Let's get back to it.
Like some of the best summer blockbusters, Bulletstorm is only interested in the player having a good time, especially replaying the title through Duke Nukem's tour in the full clip edition re-release.
You give me too much credit.
Bulletstorm easily fits into the 90s era shooters with its crass humor and constant stream of inappropriate comments and dick jokes. Bulletstorm continues to differentiate itself from other shooters of the time with its focus on rewarding the player for every kill with hilarious environmental specific names. The more inventive the carnage, the greater the reward. and it's rewarding every single time. Each gorgeous landscape the player is dropped into is punctuated by set pieces that are easily some of the game's biggest highlights, and the characters, although at times obnoxious, do have some great back and forth dialogue that will have you laughing at just how juvenile and over the top it is.
Woo! Gotta say, surprised to be breathing right now. That was a shitty time.
I can save the world from aliens, but I can't get rid of you.
Singularity.
You must have a lot of questions, but we don't have a lot of time.
The impact of games like BioShock and Half-Life on first-person shooters cannot be understated. But every now and then, a game takes those elements and adds a new wrinkle to the formula, and that's exactly what makes the criminally underrated Singularity stand out. Jumping the player back and forth between 1985 and 2010, combating increasingly supernatural events while completing objectives in one that affect the other is constantly engaging throughout, and that's not even mentioning the main draw of the game, the TMD time manipulation device. This handy little gadget can be used in everything from puzzle solving as you degrade and rewind objects within their timeline to combat, which is endlessly entertaining. Upgrading the TMD unlocks stronger powers like the ability to create a bubble that stops time for anything unlucky enough to be inside. Plus, any game that lets you do this is automatically a good time.
Some claim he is able to summon incredible power, as if he controlled the hand of God himself.
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips for MojoPlays, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.